Welcome to the Explainer. So, have you ever noticed how some things in life feel, well, pretty predictable, while other things are just completely wild? It turns out our world kind of operates on two totally different sets of rules. Today, we're going to dive into what those rules are, and I promise, figuring out which game you're actually playing can change everything.
Okay, so let's get right into it. On one side, you have this world of averages. Think about something like human height, right? You could survey 1 million people and you're just never going to find someone who's 30 feet tall. It's predictable. But then there's this other world, the world of extremes. This is where things like wealth or YouTube views or even earthquakes live. In this world, the whole idea of an average is basically useless because you have these few massive outliers that just dwarf everything else.
So, why do we get this stuff wrong so often? Why does our gut feeling about how things should work constantly trip us up? Well, it's because our brains are basically wired to think in that predictable world of averages. The problem is, we often find ourselves living and working in situations that are actually governed by extremes. We're playing one game, but using the rulebook for a totally different one. And to fix that, we need to get a handle on two really powerful ideas: the normal distribution and the power law.
All right, first, let's start in the world that feels comfortable, the one we all kind of get without even trying. This is the world of averages, and it's run by the beautiful, predictable bell curve. So this is the famous normal distribution. You've probably seen it before as the bell curve. You get this shape whenever a bunch of different random things add together. Your height is the perfect example. It's a little bit of this gene, a little bit of that gene, plus your nutrition, and a bunch of other small things all added up. And the result? Most people land somewhere near the middle, near the average. And getting a really extreme result is, well, almost impossible. It's a world with a very stable, very predictable center. And here's the absolute key to understanding this normal world. The outliers, the extreme results, are kept on a very tight leash. There's a natural ceiling. Because everything is just adding up, you can't have one single factor that suddenly makes a person 40 feet tall. It just can't happen. And that's exactly why this world feels so safe and predictable to us.
But this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. Back in the late 1800s, this economist, Vilfredo Pareto, he's looking at how wealth is distributed. And he has this huge aha moment. He realizes that wealth doesn't follow this nice, neat bell curve at all. Nope, it plays by a completely different and frankly, much wilder set of rules.
And that discovery throws us headfirst into a much weirder, way more volatile world, the game of extremes. This is a reality where outliers aren't just rare exceptions, they're everything. This is the world governed by the power law.
So what creates these wild power laws? Well, unlike the bell curve, which comes from things adding up, power laws often come from multiplicative effects. Think of it like a snowball effect, where success just leads to more success. And in this world, there is no natural limit. An outcome can be 1,000, 1,000,000, even 1,000,000,000 times bigger than what you might think of as average. This is the land of the runaway winners. You know, to really get this, let's imagine 3 simple games you could play at a casino. Game 1 is additive. Flip 100 coins, get $1 for every heads. Easy. Your winnings are going to form a perfect bell curve. Game 2 is multiplicative. Your money gets multiplied by a bit with each flip. This already creates more inequality. But Game 3, oh man, Game 3 is where our brains just completely short-circuit. This third game is actually a really famous thought experiment called the St. Petersburg paradox. Here are the rules. We flip a coin until it comes up heads. You start with $1, and the prize doubles for every tail you get in a row. It sounds so simple, right? But believe me, it leads to an outcome that is so mind-bending it completely shatters our normal way of thinking about value. So how much would you pay to play this game? Well, to figure that out, we need to calculate what's called the expected value. So a head on the first toss pays out $2, and there's a 50% chance of that. So that outcome is worth $1. A head on the second toss pays out $4, but there's only a 25% chance of that, which is worth another $1. A head on the third toss pays $8, with a 12.5% chance. You see the pattern here? Each potential outcome, no matter how unlikely, adds another full $1 to the game's total expected value. And since you could, in theory, keep flipping tails forever, you just keep adding $1 and another, all the way to infinity. The mathematical, logical expected value of this game is literally infinite. So how much should you pay to play? $1 billion? $1 trillion? I mean, your gut screams no way, but the math says yep, and that is the paradox. It's so cool because it just exposes how our logic breaks when it's faced with these insane extremes.
What this paradox really shows us is just how bizarre power law worlds are. The whole concept of an average becomes meaningless because it's completely hijacked by the tiny chance of a ridiculously huge payout. It's like this. If you and Jeff Bezos are in a room, the average net worth in that room is over $100 billion. But does that average tell you anything useful about how much money is in your pocket? Of course not. That one single outlier just rewrites the entire story.
So you might be thinking, okay, that's a neat little math trick, but does this stuff actually happen in the real world? And the answer is a resounding yes. It's everywhere. In fact, power laws are like a fingerprint for complex systems that have organized themselves to be balanced right on the edge of chaos, what scientists call a critical state.
The classic example is a sand pile. Just picture it. You're dropping grains of sand, one by one. The pile gets bigger and steeper and more unstable until it reaches this critical point. Now, the very next grain you drop, what's it going to do? It might cause a tiny little trickle of just a few grains, or it could trigger a massive, catastrophic avalanche that changes the whole shape of the pile. And the thing is, you have no way of knowing which one it's going to be. The system is just poised, balanced on a knife's edge, ready for a reaction of any size.
For a perfect and really dramatic real-world example of this, look no further than a forest. Specifically, let's talk about the legendary Yellowstone fires of 1988. This was an event that didn't just break the records, it completely obliterated them.
I mean, just look at the scale of this. It's absolutely breathtaking. In Yellowstone, a typical fire burns less than a single acre. The previous all-time record, the biggest they'd ever seen, was about 18,000 acres. But in 1988, 1.4 million acres burned. That's more than 70 times larger than the old record. This wasn't just a big fire, it was an event from another planet.
So you have to ask, what was so special about the spark that started that 1998 fire? And here is the truly mind-blowing part. Absolutely nothing. It was just a regular, run-of-the-mill lightning strike, the same kind that starts tiny little fires all the time. The difference wasn't the spark, it was the system. The forest itself, through years of fire suppression, had become a perfectly arranged tinderbox. It was in a critical state, which meant a massive fire wasn't just possible, it was basically inevitable.
Now, just like that forest, a lot of our industries, our careers, our projects are also systems that can have these huge, unpredictable outcomes. So let's get to the most important question. What does all this mean for you? How can understanding these two worlds change the way you make decisions every single day?
Honestly, knowing whether you're operating in a world of averages or a world of extremes, it's like having a strategic superpower. Because the strategy that leads to success in one world will lead to absolute failure in the other. If you use the wrong playbook, you're pretty much guaranteed to lose. And this table just lays it out perfectly. In the normal world, let's say you're running a restaurant. It's all about consistency. You need to be good every single day. One amazing meal can't make up for a month of bad ones. The average is what matters. But then you look at the power law world, something like being a venture capitalist or a YouTuber. Here, the average is totally meaningless. The whole game is about surviving all the misses so you can find that one massive grand slam home run that pays for everything else.
I mean, just think about venture capital. One major firm analyzed over 7,000 of their investments. You know what they found? More than half of them completely lost money. But it didn't matter. Not at all. Why? Because the top 6% of their deals generated 60% of all their profits. A tiny handful of extreme winners didn't just make up for the losers. They made the whole thing wildly profitable. That is the game of extremes in action.
Okay, so let's boil this all down. What should you take away from this? In a normal world, success is just the sum of all your hard work. You grind it out. But in a power law world, success is driven by one or two rare, massive wins. Most of what you try will probably fail, and you have to be okay with that. The goal isn't to avoid failure. The goal is to stay in the game long enough to take enough swings to finally hit that home run.
So that really leaves us with one big question to think about. Your career, the projects you work on, maybe even parts of your personal life. Which game are you actually playing? Is it a game of averages, where consistency is the key? Or are you in a game of extremes, where you need to be hunting for that one big transformative win? Because figuring out the rules is always the first step to winning the game.